At 10:30 hours on October 30th, 1942, Lieutenant Commander Herschel Smith stood on the damaged flight deck of USS Enterprise at Neumer, New Caledonia, watching 75 Seabees weld steel plates over bomb craters that should have sunk his ship for days earlier. The carrier was Enterprise CV-6, 25,000 tons, 824 feet long, the most decorated warship America would ever put to sea. She had just survived the Battle of Santa Cruz with 2 direct bomb hits, 75 wounded and 40 for dead. Her forward elevator was jammed. Her hull had a massive bulge on the starboard side. One fuel tank was still leaking. By every regulation in the Navy, she needed months in a shipyard, but there were no other carriers left. Lexington was gone, sunk at Coral Sea. Yorktown was gone, destroyed at Midway. Wasp was gone, torpedoed 2 months ago. Hornet had just been sunk at Santa Cruz 4 days earlier. Saratoga was in Pearl Harbor under repair from torpedo damage. Enterprise was the only operational American carrier in the entire Pacific Ocean, the only one standing between the Japanese Navy and total control of the Solomon Islands. Japanese intelligence knew this. They had declared Enterprise sunk 3 separate times in the past 10 months. First after the Battle of the Eastern Solomons in August, then after Santa Cruz in October. Each time American propaganda countered the claims. Each time Enterprise appeared again in battle, broken but fighting. The Japanese began calling her something else. The Gray Ghost, the ship that refused to die. Damage Control Officer Herschel Smith had been Enterprise's Damage Control Officer since April 1942. He was Naval Academy Class of 1922 from Michigan. He had been trained as a line officer, qualified to command ships, but his expertise was damage control. He understood how ships were built, where they were strong, where they were weak, how damage propagated through a vessel, how to stop it. Smith knew every frame, every bulkhead, every watertight door, every fire main, every pump, every electrical junction, every ventilation trunk on Enterprise. He had walked every compartment, crawled through every void space, traced every system. When damage occurred, he did not need blueprints. He could visualize in his mind exactly what was broken, exactly what was threatened, exactly what needed to be done. His damage control teams were trained to a level few other ships could match. Every man knew his role. Every team knew their equipment. They drilled constantly. Fire drills, flooding drills, bomb damage drills. They drilled in daylight, in darkness, in rough seas, in calm seas. They drilled until muscle memory took over, until they could work without thinking, until chaos became routine. In battle, Eastern Solomons and Santa Cruz. When the first bomb hit Enterprise at Eastern Solomons in August, Smith was on the bridge. He felt the explosion, saw smoke boiling up from the flight deck. He did not wait for damage reports. He ran down ladders through passageways filled with smoke toward the damage. His teams were already there, hoses spraying foam, men carrying the wounded, sailors throwing burning debris overboard. Smith assessed the situation in seconds. The bomb had penetrated 3 decks. Fires were spreading aft. Electrical power was out to half the ship. He gave orders. Contain the fire here. Shore up this bulkhead. Reroute power through these circuits. Pump water from these compartments. The teams executed. The fires were contained. The ship survived at Santa Cruz in October. Enterprise took 2 direct hits and 2 near misses within 5 minutes. Smith was below decks when the first bomb hit. The explosion knocked him off his feet. Lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in seconds later. He got up, checked himself for injuries, found none, started running toward the damage. The second bomb hit before he got there. This explosion was closer. The blast wave threw him against a bulkhead. His ears rang. His vision blurred, but he kept moving. The forward part of the ship was chaos. Smoke filled the passageways. Men were screaming. Some were on fire. Some were trapped under wreckage. Electrical cables hung from overhead, sparking. Water was pouring in from ruptured fire mains. Smith started giving orders. Get these men out. Cut that power. Close these hatches, *, pump this compartment. His voice cut through the chaos. His teams responded. They knew he would not order them to do anything impossible. They trusted him. They followed him. The damage from Santa Cruz should have sunk Enterprise. To bombs penetrating to interior spaces, near misses buckling the hull, flooding in multiple compartments, fires threatening magazines. Any one of these problems could doom a ship if not controlled immediately. All of them together should have been overwhelming, but Smith and his teams controlled them all. They saved the ship, repairs at Noumea and the Seabees at Noumea. Smith supervised repairs for 4 days with the 75th Construction Battalion Seabees. The Seabees were construction workers, not damage control specialists, but they were skilled welders, carpenters, and mechanics. Smith told them what needed to be done. They figured out how to do it. They worked in shifts 24 hours a day. Welders burned through electrode rods by the hundreds. Carpenters shaped wooden plugs to fit jagged holes in the flight deck. Mechanics jury-rigged the jammed elevator with cables and pulleys. It was not perfect, but it worked. When Enterprise sailed on November 11th with repairs incomplete, Smith knew the ship was vulnerable. If they took another hit in the bow section, the hastily welded steel plates might give way. If they took a hit near the damaged elevator, the whole mechanism could collapse. If they took a torpedo hit where the near miss had buckled the hull, the compartment would flood faster than pumps could handle. Enterprise could sink in minutes, but Smith also knew that no battle plan survived contact with the enemy. All he could do was prepare his teams to respond fast, respond correctly. Respond as if their lives and everyone else's lives depended on what they did in the next few minutes, because they did. Can she fight? During the 4 days near Guadalcanal, November 12th through November 15th, Enterprise was not hit again. The Seabees kept working. They finished repairs on the elevator, reinforced the hull patches, and restored systems to full capability. By the time Enterprise returned to Noumea on November 16th, she was in better shape than when she had sailed 5 days earlier. The ship had been repaired during combat operations. It was unprecedented. Then the message came through on November 10th. Japanese battleships were heading for Guadalcanal. They planned to bombard Henderson Field, destroy the American air base, then land reinforcements. Enterprise had to sortie now, tonight, no matter her condition. Captain Osborne Hardison received the order at 1800 hours. He had commanded Enterprise for exactly 10 days. He looked at the damage reports, looked at Smith, and asked one question: can she fight? Smith told him the truth. The forward elevator was still jammed. The hull still had leaks. Watertight integrity was compromised if they took another hit in the wrong place. Enterprise would sink fast, but her engines worked. Her steering worked. Her catapults could launch aircraft. She could fight. Hardison gave the order. Enterprise would sail at 0600 on November 11th with the Seabees still aboard, welders still working, repair crews still trying to fix what battle had broken. What happened over the next 4 days would decide the Guadalcanal campaign. The Pacific Crucible problem was not that America lacked ships. By November 1942, American shipyards were launching new destroyers, cruisers, and battleships at record pace, but carriers took longer to build. The new Essex-class carriers would not arrive until 1943. The Independence-class light carriers would not be ready until mid-1943. For now. In November 1942, Enterprise was all there was. The Japanese knew this advantage would not last. They had to destroy American forces at Guadalcanal before American industrial power overwhelmed them. They committed their combined fleet to a massive operation. Battleships Hiei and Kirishima would bombard Henderson Field. Cruisers and destroyers would escort troop transports. Carriers would provide air cover. The operation would crush American resistance and reclaim Guadalcanal. On the American side, the situation was desperate. Marines on Guadalcanal held Henderson Field by their fingernails. They needed air support. They needed supplies. They needed Enterprise to get aircraft close enough to fight Japanese ships heading south. Into the battle Enterprise left. Noumea Harbor at dawn on November 11th, she made the open sea with her deck still shaking from air hammers. Welder sparks still flashing, the big bulge in her starboard side clearly visible. Fuel oil still seeping from ruptured tanks. The Seabees kept working. Smith supervised repairs even as Enterprise headed into combat. The carrier's air group had been devastated at Santa Cruz. VF-10 Grim Reapers. The fighter squadron had lost half their pilots, VB-10. The dive bomber squadron had lost aircraft and crews. VT-10, the torpedo squadron, was down to barely functional strength, but they could still fly. They could still fight. On November 12th, Enterprise launched her first strikes against Japanese forces approaching Guadalcanal. The carrier was 200 miles from the combat zone. Her aircraft had to fly through weather fronts, navigate by dead reckoning, find targets in open ocean, then return to a moving ship. The pilots made it look routine. It was not. The sinking of Kinugasa bombers found cruiser Kinugasa at 09:00 hours, steaming northwest after bombarding Henderson Field the previous night. The cruiser thought she had escaped. She was wrong. Enterprise dive bombers Douglas SBD Dauntless aircraft from Bombing Squadron 10 rolled in from 12,000 feet. They hit her with 500-pound bombs at 9:36 in the morning. The first bomb hit the machine gun mount in front of the bridge, killing Captain Sawa and his executive officer instantly and starting a fire in the forward gasoline storage area. The ship began listing to port. A second wave of bombers arrived. More hits knocked out the cruiser's engines and rudder. Without propulsion or steering, Kinugasa was doomed. She capsized and sank at 13:45 hours, with 511 of her crew going down with her. Enterprise aircraft returned, refueled, rearmed, ate cold sandwiches, and waited for the next mission, the crippling of Hythe at night, November 12th into November 13th. American cruisers and destroyers fought a desperate surface battle against Japanese battleship Hiei and her escorts. The two forces encountered each other at point-blank range in darkness. Hiei was a Congo-class battleship, 14,000 tons, with 8 14-inch guns, heavily armored. She should have destroyed the American force. However, in the chaos, American destroyers launched torpedoes and American cruisers fired at close range. Hiei took dozens of 8-inch and 6-inch shell hits. Her steering was damaged. Her forward turrets were knocked out. A torpedo hit flooded compartments by dawn. She was crippled, circling northwest of Savo Island. The Japanese should have scuttled her then, but they tried to save her. On November 13th at dawn, Enterprise aircraft found Hiei at 0615 limping north at 8 knots. Trailing oil, listing $5 out circ dollar to starboard. Trying to reach safety. The battleship was 30 miles northwest of Savo Island. Her escorts, 3 destroyers, were still with her ... but they could not protect her from what was coming. The destruction of battleship High Enterprise launched the first strike at 0630 on November 13th, 6F for F Wildcat fighters for combat air patrol, 9 SBD Dauntless dive bombers, loaded with 1,000-pound bombs, 6 TBF Avenger torpedo planes. Carrying Mark 13 torpedoes, they found Hiei at 0720. The battleship maneuvered sluggishly due to the damage from the night battle. Dive bombers attack. The dive bombers went in first from 10,000 feet. One bomb struck near the forward turret and another hit amidships. Fires started. Torpedo planes strike. Torpedo planes attacked from low altitude, skimming the water at 200 feet. At least 2 torpedoes hit the battleship's port side, and the resulting underwater explosions opened the hull to the sea. Coordinated waves following the Enterprise aircraft. Marine aircraft from Henderson Field and Army B-17 bombers from Espiritu Santo arrived and joined the attack in waves. The combined attacks continued through the morning and afternoon. Enterprise launched a second strike at 0900 and a third strike at 1100, final damage by 1400 hours. Hiei had taken an estimated 5 to 8 torpedo hits and 7 to 8 bomb hits. Water flooded the lower decks faster than pumps could handle, and fires burned out of control. The captain gave the order to abandon ship. At 18:15 hours on November 13th, the Japanese scuttled Haie with demolition charges, and she sank in the evening darkness. 838 of her crew died. The doomed transport convoy battle was not over. More Japanese ships, including battleship Kirishima, were approaching Guadalcanal for another bombardment, and 11 Japanese troop transports were steaming south, packed with 10,000 soldiers from the veteran 38th Division for a major offensive. If they landed, they could retake Guadalcanal. Enterprise pilots were exhausted, but they kept launching strikes. The maintenance crews and the Seabees kept working miracles. On November 14th, Enterprise bombers found the Japanese troop convoy at 0800 hours. The 11 transports were tightly packed, heading straight for Guadalcanal at 12 knots. These were cargo vessels, thin hulls, no armor, and loaded with fuel and ammunition, and they had no chance against dive bombers. The sinking of the transport center's dive bombers attacked first at 0830. The first transport to sink was Okinawa Maru. A 1,000 pounds bomb hit amidships, penetrated to the engine room, and exploded. The ship broke in half and sank in minutes. 300 soldiers went down with her. Kenbi Maru took 3 hits. The captain tried to beach her, but she sank before reaching shore. 450 drowned. Brisbane Maru was hit by 2 bombs. One hit the forward hold loaded with ammunition, blowing off the bow. She sank stern first. Marine aircraft from Henderson Field and Army B-17 bombers from Espiritu Santo joined the relentless attack, with the convoy breaking apart. The ships had nowhere to run. Enterprise launched a second strike at 1000 hours with fresh pilots and more bombs. The continuous air strikes, launched primarily by the operational USS Enterprise and supported by Marine and Army aircraft from Henderson Field and Espiritu Santo, decimated the Japanese troop transport convoy, effectively ending the major Japanese effort to retake Guadalcanal. The destruction of the convoy Enterprise launched its second strike at 1000 hours, continuing the attack with fresh pilots, bombs, and torpedoes on targets still burning from the first wave. 7 of the 11 transports were sunk by 1400 hours. Arizona Maru, Brisbane Maru, Conboru Maru, Kinugawa Maru, Nagara Maru, Nako Maru, and Shinanogawa Maru. Thousands of soldiers drowned. Clinging to wreckage, the 4 remaining transports, damaged and burning, tried to reach Guadalcanal to beach themselves. They knew they were doomed but hoped to land their troops. The surviving ships reached the beach at Tesafaronga at dawn on November 15th and ran themselves aground. However, the mission failed. Most soldiers lost their equipment, including artillery, tanks, and ammunition, which were at the bottom of the ocean. Of the 10,000 soldiers who started the voyage, fewer than 2,000 made it to shore with weapons. The rest were dead or had landed with nothing but the clothes they wore. Final surface battle and aftermath. Night of November 14th into November 15th brought the final surface battle. American battleships Washington and South Dakota intercepted the Japanese force led by battleship Kirishima, while South Dakota took heavy damage. Washington revealed its position and hammered Kirishima with 16-inch and 5-inch guns at close range, setting her ablaze. The Japanese scuttled Kirishima after midnight, marking the second Japanese battleship lost in 3 days when dawn broke on November 15th. The Naval Battle of Guadalcanal was over. 4 ships lost Japanese to battleships Haie, Kirishima, 1 heavy cruiser Kinugasa, 3 destroyers, 7 troop transport Samarican to light cruisers, 7 destroyers export to Henderson Field was secure, and the Marines would hold Guadalcanal. The legacy of the Grey Ghost Captain Hardison, in a message to the Navy Department on November 16th, commended Lieutenant Commander Smith and the Seabees for their work. The emergency repairs accomplished by this skillful, well-trained, An enthusiastically energetic force have placed this vessel in condition for further action against the enemy. The real story was the strategic impact, one damaged carrier, kept operational by a dedicated damage control officer and 75 construction workers. The Seabees had helped sink 2 battleships, 1 cruiser, and 7 transports. Save Guadalcanal. Turn the Pacific War. The Japanese never attempted another major offensive at Guadalcanal after November 1942. They evacuated their remaining troops in February 1943. The island became an American base for the rest of the war, and it all hinged on those 4 days when Enterprise fought while still under repair. The ship that refused to die, Enterprise CV-6. The Guadalcanal campaign was not the first time Enterprise had defied death or proved vital to the war effort. Her operational history was one of constant action and near misses. Date event significance 7. 1941, delayed by bad weather, arrived at Pearl Harbor a day late, saving the ship. Her aircraft flew over Pearl during the attack. 7 dive bombers were shot down by Japanese and friendly fire, making Enterprise the only U.S. carrier with men at Pearl during the attack. December 10, 1941, her aircraft found and sank Japanese submarine. I-70. Drew first blood for the U.S. Navy. After war was declared, first enemy warship sunk by U.S. forces, February 1, 1940, to raided the Marshall Islands. Line Watch Malo Lab sank 3 ships, damaged 8, and escaped Japanese counterattack with minor damage. April 18, 1940, to escorted Hornet for the Doolittle Raid. Her fighters attacked Japanese picket boats. The raid shocked Japan, proving their home islands were vulnerable and forcing them to pull back air defenses. The Battle of Midway, June 4, 1942. Enterprise was the flagship for Rear Admiral Raymond Spruance, one of the most intelligent tactical commanders in the U.S. Navy. The battle was critical, as the Japanese, commanded by Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, planned to destroy the American carriers with overwhelming force for fleet carriers to light carriers and 7 battleships, including the flagship Yamato. The American ambush. American intelligence had broken the Japanese naval codes. Admiral Nimitz knew the attack was coming and positioned Enterprise, Yorktown, and Hornet northeast of Midway, hidden beyond the Japanese search radius, waiting to ambush the strike force. The battle began at 0630 when Japanese carriers launched 108 aircraft to attack Midway. Midway's defenders launched uncoordinated strikes against the Japanese carriers, but all failed to score hits. The Japanese carriers seemed invincible. The torpedo squadrons sacrificed. 0705, the American carriers launched their strikes. Over 150 American aircraft headed southwest. However, coordination fell apart and squadrons became separated. VT-6 Enterprise, Torpedo Squadron 6 from Enterprise, led by Lieutenant Commander Eugene Lindsay, found the Japanese carriers first at 09-0. 15 Douglas TBD Devastator torpedo bombers slow, obsolete, vulnerable, attacked without fighter or dive bomber escort. The Japanese Zero fighters swarmed them, and anti-aircraft fire filled the sky. 13 of the 15 were shot down. Lindsay was killed. VT-3 Yorktown, Torpedo Squadron 3 from Yorktown attacked next. 12 more Devastators. 10 were shot down. VT-8 Hornet, Torpedo Squadron 8 from Hornet followed 15 aircraft. 14 shot down. Of 41 torpedo planes that attacked, 35 were destroyed, scoring 0 hits on any Japanese carrier. The torpedo attacks seemed to have accomplished nothing but waste American lives. The tide turns, McClusky's decision. However, those torpedo attacks had drawn the Japanese Combat Air Patrol CAP down to sea level. The Zero fighters were chasing the slow torpedo planes, not watching the sky above. At that moment, at 09-5, Enterprise dive bombers arrived at altitude. Lieutenant Commander Wade McClusky, commanding Bombing Squadron 6 and Scouting Squadron 633 Dauntless dive bombers total, reached the expected intercept point at 08-0. But the carriers were not there. McClusky Sky made a decision that changed the war. Instead of returning when his fuel ran low, he expanded his search, flying northwest and then northeast. At 0955, one of McClusky's pilots spotted a lone Japanese destroyer steaming northeast. Recognizing the destroyer was racing to rejoin the fleet, McClusky followed. 5 minutes later, at 1000 hours, he saw them, for Japanese carriers in formation, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu. Hiryu. Their flight decks were crowded with aircraft being refueled and rearmed, with bombs and torpedoes scattered on deck. The carriers were at their most vulnerable. The 5 minutes that decided the war. McClusky did not hesitate. He split his formation to attack. The Japanese saw them coming, but it was too late. The Zero fighters were still at sea level, out of position. The dive bombers screamed down at $70 circ angles, releasing their 1,000-pound bombs at 1,500 feet. Kararadicking squadron hits Leyte 6, USS Enterprise for direct hits. Bombs exploded among rearming aircraft and munitions on the hangar deck became an inferno. Abandoned and scuttled after burning for hours. AKAGIVB-6, USS Enterprise one hit by LT Dick Best. The bomb penetrated the flight deck midship and exploded among aircraft and fuel in the hangar deck, turned the hangar into a fireball. Abandoned by Admiral Nagumo's crew, burned through the night, and scuttled at dawn. SORYUVB-3 Yorktown 3 hits in quick succession, engulfed in flames within minutes. Sank at 7:13 that evening. In 5 minutes, 3 of the 4 Japanese carriers had been mortally wounded. The final carrier, Hiryu, the 4th carrier, was separated and had not been attacked. At noon, she launched her remaining aircraft against the American carriers, finding and hitting Yorktown with bombs and torpedoes, leaving her dead in the water. Enterprise had to finish Hiryu at 3:30 in the afternoon. Enterprise launched 24 dive bombers. They found Hiryu at 5:05 p.m. for bombs hit, all on the flight deck, starting immediate. Severe fires. Hiryu was scuttled the next morning. For Japanese carriers destroyed. American losses were Yorktown and a destroyer sunk. Enterprise and Hornet survived and damaged. The battle was the turning point of the Pacific War, and Enterprise dive bombers, led by McClusky's critical decision to expand his search, had made the difference. Eastern Solomons, August 24, 1942. Battle of the Eastern Solomons. Enterprise fought off massive Japanese air attacks while her own aircraft sank. Light carrier Ryuyo. Enterprise took 3 direct bomb hits and, for near misses, 74 men killed, 95 wounded despite the serious damage to the flight deck and hull at the Eastern Solomons. The damage control teams patched the holes. Enterprise steamed back to Pearl Harbor under her own power and was repaired in 5 weeks. Back in action by mid-October, October 26, 1942, Battle of Santa Cruz Islands. 2 more bomb hits. 44 more dead, 75 wounded. Hornet sunk. Enterprise was the last carrier standing. By the end of 1942, Enterprise had participated in 5 of the 6 major carrier battles in the Pacific. She had been hit by bombs 5 times, lost nearly 200 men killed, and had been declared sunk by Japanese propaganda 3 times, yet she kept fighting. The Grey Ghost's legend. The Japanese could not understand how this ship kept appearing in battles after they claimed to have sunk her. Their confusion stemmed from 2 factors: superior damage control. American damage control doctrine was superior to Japanese practice. American carriers had better compartmentalization, fire suppression systems, and better trained repair crews. The crew. Enterprise had something more. She had Smith, the damage control officer, the Seabees, the construction workers, and captains like Hardison who would take a damaged ship into battle. She had a crew that believed their ship was special, that she could not be sunk, and that they would survive anything. Continued war service 1943 to 1945 and 1943 and 1944. As new Essex-class carriers joined the fleet, Enterprise's role changed, but she was still fighting. She participated in the Gilbert Islands Campaign, Marshall Islands Campaign, strikes against Truk, Marianas Campaign, Battle of the Philippine Sea, Leyte Gulf and Night Operation Soctor 1944. Battle of Leyte Gulf. In the largest naval battle in history, Enterprise aircraft sank 3 enemy ships and shot down 50 to enemy planes, more than any other carrier in the battle. She took 2 kamikaze hits, but the damage was minor. Late 1944, Enterprise pioneered night carrier operations. She became the first carrier equipped and trained for round-the-clock air operations, protecting the fleet and striking Japanese bases in darkness. The concept was so successful, the Navy created dedicated night carrier air groups. Final battles, February 1945, Iwo Jima. Her aircraft flew continuously over the island for 174 hours, 74 hours of continuous air operations. An endurance record, March 1945, participated in strikes against the Japanese home islands Tokyo, Kobe, Nagoya. April 11, 1945, Okinawa. A kamikaze hit the forward part of the flight deck, 14 killed, 34 wounded. The forward elevator was damaged again. Enterprise steamed to Ulithi for repairs, May 14, 1945, back at Okinawa. Another kamikaze. Another kamikaze? This one penetrated the flight deck and exploded near the forward elevator. 13 men killed, 68 wounded. The explosion blew a hole through multiple decks. Fires raged, but the damage control teams contained the damage. Enterprise survived. This was her last wound of World War II. The damage was severe enough that repairs took until late August. By the time Enterprise returned to the Pacific, Japan had surrendered. She missed the surrender ceremony in Tokyo Bay. After 7 years of service and 20 major battles, Enterprise was in a repair dock when the war ended. The final tally and honors final tally of the USS Enterprise CV-6 was staggering: 911. Enemy aircraft shot down. 71. Enemy ships sunk by her bombers. 192. More enemy ships damaged or destroyed, steamed over. 275,000 miles in wartime operations, participated in 18 of the 22 major carrier actions in the Pacific. Enterprise earned 20 battle stars, 3 more than any other U.S. warship in World War II. She was the only carrier to receive both the Presidential Unit Citation and the Navy Unit Commendation. On November 23, 1945, the British Admiralty presented Enterprise with the Admiralty Pennant, an honor given to a foreign warship for the first time in over 400 years. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal called Enterprise the one vessel that most nearly symbolizes the history of the United States Navy in World War II. A forgotten hero. Despite her honors, America forgot. Enterprise was decommissioned on February 17, 1947. Plans to preserve her as a memorial were announced, but fundraising failed. She sat in reserve for years. On July 1, 1958, Enterprise was sold to Lipset Corporation for scrapping. By March 1960, she was gone, cut up for scrap metal at Kearney, New Jersey. The most decorated ship in U.S. Navy history, the gray ghost that refused to die in battle, was destroyed by accountants and indifference. The men behind the legend Herschel Smith, damage control officer, who kept Enterprise fighting through 20 battles. Retired as a captain but never received a major decoration for his work. Captain Hardison, commander during November 1942 battles. Retired as a vice admiral and died in 1959. The Seabees who repaired her under fire returned to construction work after the war, viewing themselves as construction workers, not heroes. Wade McClusky, Air Group Commander at Midway, whose decision to expand his search changed the course of the war, retired as a rear admiral, but few remember his name. Over 30,000 men served aboard Enterprise. 103 enlisted men and 1 officer earned all 20 battle stars awarded to the ship. Their stories are mostly forgotten. In 1958, the same year Enterprise was sold for scrap, the Navy commissioned a new carrier, USS Enterprise CV-6, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in history. She served for 51 years, longer than any other carrier. Commissioned in November 1961. She deployed to the Mediterranean, the Pacific, participated in the Cuban Missile Crisis, served multiple tours in Vietnam, and conducted operations in the Indian Ocean and Persian Gulf. The name lived on through decades of Cold War and beyond. In the future, another Enterprise will be built, CV-8, a Ford-class supercarrier. Scheduled for completion in the 2030s, the name will not die. But the original Enterprise, the Gray Ghost, the carrier that fought from Pearl Harbor to Okinawa, exists now only in photographs and memories. The loss and the legacy there is a lesson in how Enterprise was lost. America spent billions building her. She fought in every major battle of the Pacific War, earned more decorations than any other ship, and symbolized American naval power at its finest moment. And when the war ended, she was scrapped because no one wanted to pay for her preservation. The failure to save Enterprise became a wake-up call that changed how America preserves its military heritage. After her loss, preservation movements gained momentum, leading to the saving of other historic vessels. USS Intrepid, New York; USS Hornet, California; USS Lexington, Texas; USS Yorktown, South Carolina. For Essex-class carriers and one Midway-class carrier were saved, now educating millions of visitors. But Enterprise, the ship that mattered most, was gone. That loss taught America a lesson it would not forget. The true meaning of naval power, the full story of Enterprise, of her damage at Santa Cruz, her emergency repairs by the Seabees, and her critical role in the Naval Battle of Guadalcanal was rediscovered by a historian in Navy archives in 1991. Veterans in their 70s by then remembered. They remembered November 1942 when Enterprise was the only American carrier left. They remembered sailing into battle while still under repair, with Seabees welding steel plates on the flight deck while Japanese aircraft attacked. They remembered that their ship had made the difference. That is how naval power actually works in war. Not through the newest ships or the biggest guns, but through sailors and officers who keep damaged ships fighting. Through construction workers who repair carriers under fire. Through pilots who fly one more mission when they are too exhausted to see straight. Through damage control teams who fight fires and patch holes while the ship heads back into combat. Enterprise was the most dangerous American warship of World War II. Not because she was the biggest or newest or most advanced. She was dangerous because she would not quit. She was the Gray Ghost, the ship that refused to die.